Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this informational and feedback session today. Before Dr. Howard begins, I will go over some housekeeping items for the session. First, the session will be recorded and the presentation, recording, and transcript will be made available on our LIHWAP website later today. And the website information will be included in this session, and we will go over what it looks like and where it is. Second, I wanted to review the protocol for the chat box, the question and answer box, and later for the listening session. And this information will also be repeated later as necessary. First, we will be doing a question and answer session with select questions after the informational session of this presentation. So we encourage you to put in questions in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. If you are calling in on your phone, you will not be able to access this feature, so it will need to be on your laptop or your phone app if you are calling in on Zoom on one of those platforms. So at the bottom of your screen, there should be a Q&A item, and you can click on that and then put in questions. We will select from these questions and answer some of them at the end. You can put in questions along the way as we go over the informational portion, but we encourage you to identify which portions you're asking the questions about, and to the extent possible, try to make them clear, as we will not have the chance to clarify individual questions. Additionally, as we will be sharing a comprehensive survey, we also encourage you to put in your questions there, but we will receive all questions. And second, regarding other comments, there is also a chat box. So you can put in comments along the way. These will also be gathered and reviewed by us at the end of the session. But if you have questions, we encourage you to please enter them into the question and answer box instead. Due to the size of this webinar, if you have logistical issues, you can put those in the chat box, and we will try to identify and address them as they come along. But we also encourage you to try exiting and then re-entering the webinar, as this webinar is very large. And then finally, at the end, after the question and answer section, we will also have a listening session. And at that point, we will give you further instructions for how to raise your hands and then provide audio feedback. But throughout the session, we will not be taking comments directly. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Howard.
Thank you so much, Edie. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you who are on the West Coast like me. My name is Dr. Laniqua Howard, and I am the Director of the Office of Community Services, and I have the great pleasure of welcoming you to our first information and feedback session on the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, known as LIHWAP. Water affordability reached a level of crisis way before the pandemic, but for low-income households and communities of color that have been disproportionately impacted by job loss and poor health outcomes related to the coronavirus, unaffordable water and wastewater bills mean that families are forced to choose between paying for water and other necessities like housing, medicine, and food. While I personally believe families should never have to choose between basic necessities, being forced to make these trade-offs during a pandemic where access to clean water is needed to help avoid a deadly virus is unacceptable. With that being said, I would like to personally thank all of you on this call that have been working tirelessly to support individuals and families that are disproportionately impacted by water debt and shutoffs. Your efforts to help these households maintain access to clean water and wastewater services during a pandemic is laudable, and we are excited to be able to support you in this effort. It is not often that we have an opportunity to expand the social safety net, even if temporarily. So we have been working diligently to stand up this brand new program as quickly as possible, including working with our federal, state, local, and tribal partners to understand the water landscape across the nation, as well as potential challenges to implementing the water program. And we appreciate you joining us today to lend your expertise and your experience with either water and wastewater services or assisting low-income families with obtaining the resources that they need to support themselves and their family members. Next slide, please. Yesterday, we released the terms and conditions for the LIHWAP program, It was a major milestone in our timeline for releasing the LIHWAP funding. And today, and over the course of the next week or so, we will be seeking your input and feedback on the model plan and the type of guidance and TA needed to ensure you can set up an effective and efficient program. More specifically, during today's session, we will provide background on LIHWAP, provide updates on what we've done to set up this new program and what's left to do. We will then provide detailed information on the various ways outside of today's session that you can provide comments and feedback on the program. This is very important because your feedback will help us make final decisions on a number of key aspects, including what is included in the plan that LIHWAP grantees have to submit. Before ending today's session, we will also identify next steps and what information we need from grantees in order to get funding out as quickly as possible. Then we will open the floor up for questions and comments. Please feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A box throughout the presentation. We will not be able to respond to all of your questions that are raised during the session, but we will save all of the questions we receive and include a number of them in our LIHWAP FAQ. Next slide. So as I've indicated earlier, the purpose of this session is really to share information on what we've done and what's left to come, and to listen to your comments, questions, and concerns. Next slide. And so, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the team that has been working so hard to stand up OCS's new Emergency Water Assistance Program. You will hear from each of them during today's presentation. Janelle George is the Deputy Director of the Office of Community Services. Lauren Christopher is the Director of OCS's Division of Energy Assistance, which will administer LIHWAP alongside LIHEAP. Next slide. Jess Hassett is a Senior Advisor within OCS and has been leading a lot of the work around LIHWAP terms and conditions. Christina Clark is a Program Specialist and has been taking the lead on tribal engagement and support. And last but not least, Edie Wu is a Special Assistant within OCS and has been coordinating essentially every aspect of this new program. I'm incredibly proud of the work that this team has done to help ensure that those most in need will have access to clean water and wastewater services during this pandemic. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Janelle George to get us started.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. With a somewhat broad legislative direction, the Office of Community Services has worked through many aspects to stand up our new water program. So what I am going to do is briefly review the authorizing legislation that established this new emergency water program, and then I will highlight some components to help clarify our mandate. The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 and the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 appropriated over $1.1 billion for a new emergency water and wastewater assistance program. OCS, as Dr. Howard mentioned, has established the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program, or LIHWAP, to implement this congressional mandate. This authorizing legislation instructs us to assist low-income households, particularly those households with the lowest incomes that pay a high proportion of household income for drinking water and wastewater services. OCS is going to carry out this mandate by awarding these emergency funds to eligible grantees for the purposes of providing funds to owners or operators of public water systems or treatment works to reduce the arrearages of and rates charged to these such households and such services. This authorizing legislation specifies that up to 3% of the amount appropriated shall be reserved for Indian tribes and tribal organizations. It also specifies the allocation formula that we are to employ. This formula is going to be determined by the percentage of households in the state or under the jurisdiction of the Indian tribe with income equal to or less than 150% of the federal poverty line, and the percentage of such households in the state or under the jurisdiction of the Indian tribe that spend more than 30% of monthly income on housing. Finally, the legislation also directs us to use existing processes, procedures, policies, and systems in place to the extent that is practicable. I will tell you that the research that OCS has conducted did lead us to conclude a few points. First, the most closely comparable program we administer is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. Therefore, we are modeling much of the rules and the procedures for this new water program around the rules in the federal LIHEAP statute, which is going to be addressed a little bit later in this presentation. The other key point is that we cannot apply the HHS block grant regulations found at 45 CFR Part 96. We can't apply that to LIHWAP. And the reason for that is because the block grant regulations were issued for very specific and an exclusive list of programs to which the regulations apply. And for that reason, the OMB Uniform Administrative Guidance, which is the default rule for HHS grants and what HHS previously adopted in its regulations for 45 CFR Part 75, that is what's going to apply to LIHWAP, and it will apply in its entirety. Now, I'd like to turn it to Lauren Christopher, whose division is responsible for administering LIHWAP. And Lauren is going to walk us through the adaptations of current processes and procedures for purposes of implementing the LIHWAP. Lauren?
Okay, thank you very much, Janelle, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining the call today. So as you heard from Dr. Howard and Janelle, this new emergency program arose from the needs caused by the pandemic. More people are struggling to keep their water and their wastewater services on as they become unemployed, underemployed, or face other pandemic-related troubles such as significant medical bills and lost time from work. It is with that in mind that we have moved on an accelerated path to start up this brand new program as quickly and as effectively as possible. While this program lacks a permanent authorization as of yet, we have tried to think through the critical implementation needs that will enable effective and efficient program administration. There are several reasons why we chose to model this new program, the LIHWAP, mostly on the existing Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, LIHEAP. First, LIHEAP has a 40-year track record of working with the same target population, as well as with working with utility providers. That has given those who administer LIHEAP a lot of experience in negotiating consumer protections and reconciling records with small, medium, and large-size utility providers. Second, the LIHEAP law provides an effective balance between broad federal parameters, but still allowing flexibility for each state, tribe, and territory to tailor the program to meet local needs. And we think a similar approach will work well for this water program. Third, we assume that most states, tribes, and territories will probably designate their current LIHEAP team to administer the water program, and therefore it makes sense to build upon what is already familiar and working well. As such, as you've heard, our Division of Energy Assistance, DEA, that administers LIHEAP at the federal level will also have responsibility for overseeing the water program, LIHWAP. Our startup team, whom you are hearing from today, has focused on two critical items needed to get this program going. First, we needed to flesh out the federal rules in writing, which we have already done through the establishment of terms and conditions specific to the LIHWAP. Second, we have drafted a template or model plan for LIHWAP grantees to use to first notify and collaborate with their own communities about how the state, tribe, or territory intends to implement their LIHWAP. And second, provide those details to our agency for our review and record-keeping purposes. That model plan has been posted to our new LIHWAP website and is available for your public input, as Seth Hassett will explain more in a little bit. Next slide, please. We are targeting the funding release by the end of May. However, in order to achieve that, there are 3 critical responses that we need in writing from each prospective grantee. First is the name and contact information of the person designated by the governor or tribal chief to administer the new water program. Those responses were due March 8th. We are still trying to obtain this information from more than 30 prospective grantees. Second, we need each prospective grantee to sign the terms and conditions that we released yesterday and complete the federal standard form 424M, like mandatory. Again, we released both of these items through an action transmittal yesterday that we sent to the designated officials that we already know about. We are seeking their response with both of those items by next Tuesday, April 27th. We recognize this is a very short turnaround, but we're emphasizing that everything must move at an accelerated pace at our level, as well as at the grantee, the sub-grantee, and the water provider levels. So upon receipt and acceptance by our agency, ACF, these new grantees will have access to the administrative portion of the grant. Third and finally, we need the grantees to submit a complete LIHWAP plan, which is their application, formal application for funding. They will need to get public input prior to submitting their plan to our office. Again, upon receipt, review, and acceptance by our office, grantees will then have access to the full grant in order to start processing benefit payments on behalf of households. One important aspect of the terms and conditions is that there are federal deadlines for both obligating the funds, meaning to legally bind the grantee to pay a specific amount to an entity for a specific purpose, and for expending the funds, meaning to issue payments against those obligations. An example of this distinction is that the grantee or the sub-grantee approves a household's application for assistance, and that would be an obligation. I'm committing $400 on behalf of John Doe household. Whereas the expenditure does not occur until the grantee or the sub-grantee actually mails the benefit check or transmits the payment electronically to the water provider. Next slide, please. What you see on the screen now is a table showing the areas of key differences in the federal rules between LIHEAP and LIHWAP. First, let's talk about administrative costs, because we know it's a given. We're all going to incur administrative costs to get this program up and running. Under LIHEAP, there are 2 different administrative cost caps for our grantees. For states and territories, they are allowed to use up to 10% of their LIHEAP grant to use any source of federal funding for admin costs for LIHEAP. For tribes, they can use up to 20% of the first $20,000 of their LIHEAP grant, and then an additional 10% of any balance they receive above that. For LIHWAP, we decided to make it a standard 15% administrative cost cap for all grantees, states, tribes, and territories. Next, if we look at public input or public hearings on the plan, what our LIHEAP grantees are used to is that states and territories have to hold a public hearing on their LIHEAP plan prior to submitting it to our agency. Tribes are not required to hold a public hearing, but they are required to get public participation, such as posting flyers around their community, making a copy of the plan available in their offices or on their website, having calls with community leaders, etc. For LIHWAP, we decided to make this consistent for all grantees. So no public hearing is required by the federal government. but public participation is, again, posting to your website, having calls with stakeholders, whatever each grantee deems to be feasible and useful for getting that public input on the plan for LIHWAP prior to submitting to our office. For the next two items, I've already hinted that it's a little different for obligation and expenditure between these two programs, and I can't emphasize this enough. Big difference. For LIHEAP, our grantees are used to obligating 90% of their LIHEAP grants in the same federal fiscal year in which we award the grant. Now remember, the federal fiscal year runs from October 1st through September 30th of each year. LIHEAP grantees are permitted to carry over up to 10% of that grant to obligate in the next year. For LIHWAP, we decided to not have a minimum obligation amount in this first year. Therefore, we are setting a standard federal obligation deadline of September 30th, 2023. So when you receive the grant this year, you can use any portion of it up through September 30th, 2023, or federal fiscal year 2023. Regarding expenditures or the liquidation of the money to actually pay out against those obligations. Under LIHEAP, there's no federal expenditure deadline. Rather, the LIHEAP regulations require each LIHEAP grantee to follow the same expenditure deadline that each grantee has to use with their own funding, their own state funding, territory funding, or tribal funding. So it varies by each grantee, which is obviously an interesting challenge to track. For LIHWAP, we decided to have a standard expenditure deadline across all grantees, and that expenditure deadline is December 30th, 2023. So essentially, all LIHWAP grantees, tribes, territories, and states will have approximately 90 calendar days after the close of federal fiscal year 2023 in which to draw down and liquidate, pay out all of the LIHWAP money. Next, if we look at targeting households, it's similar, but a slight distinction between these two programs. With respect to LIHEAP, we know that the federal statute, Assurance 5, requires all LIHEAP grantees to target those households that have the highest home energy burden. And that means those households that pay the highest percentage of their household income towards their home heating and cooling expenditures. With LIHWAP, there is a similar requirement to target households, but it is based on their home water, their drinking water, and their home wastewater services. So those bills combined, what percentage or proportion of their household income goes towards those bills. And those with the highest percentage or the highest burden are to receive the highest priority and commensurate benefits. Regarding continuity of services, under LIHEAP, it's essentially encouraged that the LIHEAP benefit would be sufficient to ensure that a household that is already disconnected gets reconnected, or that a household that is facing imminent disconnection avoids disconnection. Again, with both of these programs, they're within the Department of Health and Human Services for a reason. We're trying to save lives. We're trying to keep people healthy in their homes. So we encourage our grantees to have that in mind as they structure their benefit payment matrices accordingly. With LIHWAP, it was pretty clear from the legislation from Congress that that is, again, strongly prioritized, that the benefit for LIHWAP for water is actually going to get that household reconnected if their services are off, or if they're facing an imminent disconnection of their drinking water or wastewater services, that the benefit will help get them to avoid that disconnection. So we're not just trying to pay down the bill, we're trying to make sure there is continuity of services. Again, remembering the importance of water and wastewater services in light of the pandemic and the need to keep our hands clean to avoid transmission of the COVID-19 virus. Lastly on the slide, and as you heard Janelle explain, there is a big difference in which regulations are required of the LIHWAP grantees. Under LIHEAP, which was established as a formal block grant program that again gives lots of flexibility to each grantee to tailor the program accordingly, 45 CFR, which is the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 96 applies to LIHEAP grantees, and it's regarding HHS block grant programs. There are also some parts of 45 CFR Part 75, which are required of LIHEAP grantees, but only a few sections, mostly related to audit requirements and monitoring of subrecipients, subgrantees. Part 75 are the regulations that HHS used to adopt the Office of Management and Budget, OMB's Uniform Administrative Guidance. So you might be more familiar with the citation to CFR Part 200. So in your mind, just know it's synonymous. If you hear 2 CFR Part 200, in our context that is 45 CFR Part 75. With respect to the water program, LIHWAP, as Janelle mentioned, Part 96 will not be required of the new water grantees because LIHWAP was not established formally as a block grant program. However, all of Part 75, the Uniform Administrative Guidance, will apply, including the cost principles, etc. Next slide, please. So the next 2 slides are a flow chart of the process that we have identified as being essential for all prospective water program grantees to engage with us timely in order for us to issue grant award letters. The actions on this first slide are the ones that we have already completed. So good news. The legislation has been put into law by Congress and the President. We have established written procedures through those terms and conditions and sent those out publicly now. We have sought designation letters from all of the grantees, but as I mentioned, we are still missing quite a few letters, including from some states, some territories, and some tribes. So reminders were sent on April 7th. If you are planning to apply for funding and you have not submitted that letter yet, that needs to be done as soon as possible. If you have questions regarding whether your government is eligible, we believe that some of those questions will be answered in today's session, as well as on the session on Thursday for tribes. If you have other questions about who you can designate or other issues that are impacting your designation that you don't feel are addressed today, we will have contact information at the end of this presentation so that you can reach out to us offline to get those questions answered as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. And so the processes on this slide are the actions that are still coming up. So the next step is that we need each state, tribe, and territory to sign those terms and conditions and to fill out the SF 424M form and email those back to us by next Tuesday. As you'll hear from Seth, again, there is a public survey where we're seeking input, particularly on the model plan, and that survey will close on next Tuesday as well, April 27th. This will allow our office to consider changes to the plan and prepare our training and technical assistance tools for the new grantees. Once we have all the information that we need on that step, grantees will receive their funding allocations, again, by late May, and they will be permitted to draw down up to 15% of the grant to cover those administrative costs immediately so they can start their own program design and implementation. After that, we will be sending an action transmittal with the final model plan and setting a deadline for the grantees to submit those plans to us. At each step of this, we will be providing training and technical assistance and issuing guidance to the grantees. Again, once we receive those plans and accept them, that will be the point at which grantees are allowed to draw down the remaining funding in order to provide benefits on behalf of households, remembering that they draw down in increments over time to meet their reasonable immediate needs. So we don't draw down the entire award right away, we just draw down as needed over time. So with that, I think that's an overview of where we have gotten in the process. And now I would like to turn it over to Seth Hassett, who will discuss how we are obtaining additional public input into this process. Seth?
Okay, thank you very much, Lauren. So as we mentioned earlier, due to the large number of organizations and interested parties in this new program effort, we are creating a variety of mechanisms for input. This session is one part of this process, but to help manage input from the extensive array of stakeholder organizations, OCS has created a survey tool to obtain input in a structured manner. And this survey will provide input to help OCS and its partners in creating guidance materials, estimating timelines, designing technical assistance materials, and in refining the model plan that will be used by states, territories, and tribes. And we also hope that in answering the survey, it will help potential grantees begin considering some of the key areas that you will need to be considering in your planning efforts and adaptation of current policies and procedures. A link to the survey, as was mentioned earlier, was sent out to potential grantees yesterday, Monday, April 19th, through a Dear Colleague letter. It is also available on our OCS website, and a link to the survey is provided here. So in order to have your results included in the review, the survey must be completed by April 27th. We will not be able to include results after that date in our analysis due to a very tight schedule. The survey begins with questions that relate to your role in an organization you represent. And this is really important because it will help us to organize the responses and better understand the types of responses coming from different types of organizations, whether it's a prospective state grantee, a tribal government, or a national organization that represents a particular set of organizations. There will also be throughout in the survey opportunities for general comments and any areas that are not addressed explicitly in the survey. It's possible to cut and paste a response from another document, and the response is not timed, so it's possible to review the survey, research specific items, and then return and give your response. We do encourage you to try to put the responses specific to the questions we're asking because of the volume of input we're expecting. And there's also an optional field at the end where you can provide contact information if you would like OCS to be able to follow up with clarifications or to find out more about items in your response. So the next slide. We'll talk more about various areas in more depth of the following slides, but the survey seeks input related to the following areas: understanding of the drinking water and wastewater needs in your jurisdiction or service area, or even among the organizations you represent, understanding about existing water assistance programs and supports that may be in your service area or that you are aware of, and what are going to be the challenges and opportunities for adaptation of existing policies and procedures in areas such as household eligibility, where we're looking to get information about our expectation to adapt LIHEAP criteria. Also information about targeting benefits to low-income households with the highest water burden, selecting sub-providers, what is necessary in terms of state and tribal regulations and rulemaking, including any expedited or emergency authorities that can be implemented, talking about vendor agreements, consumer protections, data collection, and reporting. The survey also requests input on tribal government needs, and while this is obviously relevant to tribes, other organizations may also answer questions in this area. and we'll need to be able to sort responses. So, but we do think there is many cases states may have input, especially if there's a situation where the state may be providing services to tribal members. We have questions also about anticipated technical assistance needs and anticipated timeframes for how soon benefits can be delivered to households. So we can go to the next slide. Just to talk in a little more depth about understanding of drinking water and wastewater needs. The survey asks for your input about your understanding of current drinking water and wastewater needs. And we'd ask you to either answer in terms of the geographic areas served by your organization, whether it's a state, a tribal jurisdiction area, or a service area covered by a water utility, or even among the organizations that you represent in an association. And we will be able to sort your responses. But some of the kinds of issues that we're looking for input on might include things like cost and affordability, quality, safety, issues or challenges that relate to disconnection policies, late fees, home liens, or issues that relate to even the service delivery system in your area and the complexities that you may face. So on the next item has to do with an opportunity to provide input on existing water programs and supports. And this is one of the most important areas for input from our perspective, not only because the goal is to build upon and adapt existing systems and practices, but also because it will help us identify programs and systems that are already in place. So we ask you to help identify existing water assistance programs and utility supports in your area, identify the funding sources, whether it's federal funding, state, local foundations, or philanthropic organizations, describe the service areas, whether it's if it covers an entire state, a selected community, any information you can provide in that area will be valuable to us, and the eligibility requirements. And if there's a website that provides useful background or an existing water support information, we would strongly encourage you to provide a link in the comment section of the survey so that we can review and gain more information, which would be helpful for identifying potentially best practices and also helping OCS and its partners have a good sense of what types and supports of efforts LIHWAP effort will be supplementing. So the next item has to do with adaptation of existing policies and procedures. So after providing information on your organization, your understanding of drinking water and wastewater needs and existing programs and supports, survey respondents can provide input on the challenges and needs related to adaptation of existing policies and procedures. As we've noted earlier, we have a series of questions related to adaptation throughout this survey. In many instances, the survey provides information from the terms and conditions which are adapted from legislative requirements in LIHEAP, such as information on eligibility criteria or consumer protections. If you're already a LIHEAP administrator, you should recognize some of the existing language from assurances and other materials related to eligibility, so this will be familiar. Many of the other elements which are posted are closely modeled on LIHEAP, and these, again, may include areas such as not only household eligibility, but targeting benefits to low-income households with the highest water burden, selection of sub-providers, state and tribal regulations, vendor agreements, consumer protections, and data collection and reporting. So what we would like to encourage you to do is think about these areas, consider the challenges and likely needs you'll face before completing the survey, and even make some notes for yourself in advance in case you want to be able to cut and paste or just have a reference. So the next slide has to do with tribal government needs. And we have a series of questions in this area. And obviously the questions are relevant to tribes, but anyone with can respond who has relevant information. And we, as we said, we can sort this. In particular, there are state respondents who may be aware that you have a tribal community, a tribal jurisdiction that you will be serving directly, or you may serve directly. And it's helpful for you to identify any issues related to outreach, to tribal members if a tribe does not apply directly for a LIHWAP grant. This is an opportunity for an open-ended response, but we've provided some examples of areas of interest, such as unique concerns related to data availability on household water burden, the status of water utilities, such as any instances of tribal ownership of a water utility, the unique issues related to the water delivery infrastructure, whether it be wells versus plumbing systems, land ownership and water bills, and in some instances, information about whether there would be a standard water bill, and recommended areas for federal guidance or technical assistance specifically related to tribes. So on that note, the next area for input has to do with anticipated technical assistance needs in a general way. This is an opportunity to provide anticipated technical assistance needs. We provided some options you can select, and you can identify as many as you want, but we encourage you to add additional information on not only on areas, subject matter areas, but also methodologies for technical assistance that you would like to recommend and that you believe it would be useful for you in terms of receiving assistance. So the last area in that respect has to do with the anticipated time frame for assistance to households. Having answered all the questions in the earlier sections and considering opportunities for expedited procedures, we're asking respondents to give an estimate of how long you will take it to begin making payments on behalf of individual households after receiving your award. The understanding here should be that these are emergency needs, and the goal is to make payments on behalf of households as efficiently and responsibly as possible. We recognize this will be an estimate, but it will help us in getting an idea from the perspective of different parties of how long it is likely to take to begin making direct payments. You'll also have an opportunity to provide a narrative description of factors affecting your estimate. We strongly encourage you to provide additional description. For example, if you think some benefits can be delivered very quickly based on current systems and others may take a little longer, you can provide that information, as well as guidance, clarification, and technical assistance that might expedite the distribution of resources. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Christina Clark, who's going to provide some additional information that you need to know.
Great, thank you, Seth. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone on the line. We covered a lot of information today, so I'm going to present a few key takeaways for you to keep in mind. The first is the designation letter. An action transmittal was sent via email to governing state officials and chief executives of eligible tribes requesting the designation of a responsible government official that will be empowered to submit the state or tribal plan and to sign any assurances related to the LIHWAP program. Designation letters are requested to be sent by March 8th. And while we have received many designation letters from eligible entities, there are still over 30 letters that have not been received. The designation of a responsible governing official is the first step towards receiving a LIHWAP grant award. And if you have not submitted a designation letter, we request that you send this to the appropriate email address as soon as possible. And there is an email address for tribes and another for states and territories, and I will go over those two resources on a contact slide at the end of these reminders. The next item I want to emphasize once again is the LIHWAP survey. There will be an opportunity to share some remarks before the call ends today. However, we strongly encourage each of you to complete the LIHWAP survey. This will be an opportunity for you to share your knowledge and experience related to several key program components. And as Seth mentioned, the information you provide will be used to create guidance materials, estimate timeframes, design technical assistance materials, and to refine the model plan that will be used by each grantee. A Dear Colleague letter was sent yesterday via email, and this letter includes links to the survey, as well as links to terms and conditions in the model plan. The model plan should be reviewed prior to completing the survey. If you did not receive the Dear Colleague letter, it can be accessed on the LIHWAP webpage. The survey is administered through SurveyMonkey, which is relatively easy to use. Once you click on the link or add it to your web browser, you'll be directly brought to the first page of the survey where you can begin to add information. As a reminder, the survey will remain open until Tuesday, April 27th, and all surveys must be submitted by that time in order for your comments and questions to be reviewed. The next item I want to mention is the LIHWAP grantee plan, or the model plan. The model plan is currently in draft form, and the survey includes a section that is dedicated to feedback on the draft plan. The draft plan will be finalized after we've reviewed comments from the survey, and the final version of the plan must be submitted and approved before LIHWAP allocations above the 15% administrative portion can be drawn down. Once again, a link to the draft plan is included in the Dear Colleague letter with the survey information, and that letter can be found on our webpage. Also, the terms and conditions in the SF424M. After submission of the designation letter, signing and returning the terms and conditions in the SF424M form are the next steps that eligible LIHWAP grantees must complete. Terms and conditions were also sent via email yesterday to designated contacts that were received as of that date. These documents can also be found on the LIHWAP page. The terms and conditions are final documents that must be signed by the person identified in the designation letter prior to LIHWAP allocations being released. Acceptance of the terms and conditions in the SF424M will initiate the allocation and access to the administrative portion of the LIHWAP award. The LIHWAP page is a good resource and a great place to find information related to the LIHWAP program. So I'm going to take a minute just to show you the web page. Okay. Here's the web page, and you can access this through the Office of Community Services under Programs. And you'll see here, we've highlighted the important information for you to take note of in the upcoming week. So the link to the survey is here. And then you'll also be able to find a link to the model grantee plan and also to the terms and conditions. The laws and regulations related to the LIHWAP program are also posted there. And then under the policy and guidance, you'll find the action transmittal and Dear Colleague letters that were previously sent. Lastly, you can also find contacts for the LIHWAP program on the webpage, and you will be able to find upcoming information here as well, things that will be happening in the future. And I'll just switch back here. Finally, I want to provide you with contact information related to the LIHWAP program. Now, due to the high volume of questions regarding the establishment of this emergency program, we ask that you note and use the designated communication channels. The first line of communication is the LIHWAP survey, and we strongly encourage you to use the survey for any feedback and questions. OCS will review and assess all questions and feedback from the survey that are received prior to next Tuesday, April 27th. There are also 2 email addresses designated for prospective grantees. If you are a state or territory, please use LIHWAPstates@acf.hhs.gov. If you are a tribe or a tribal organization, please use LIHWAPtribes@acf.hhs.gov. Please note these 2 email addresses are for prospective grantees only, and all other general inquiries should be sent to LIHWAP@acf.hhs.gov. And all 3 of those email addresses are on the screen, so you take note of those. So this concludes the presentation portion of this session. At this time, I would like to turn things over to my colleague, Edie Wu, who will begin the question and answer portion.
Thank you all for submitting your questions in the Q&A box. We have looked through them and we will be answering a number of them. For those questions that we are not able to answer, we will take them all into consideration. And as Seth mentioned, we will be looking for your questions and feedback in the survey as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Janelle George to begin answering some of the questions that have come in.
I also want to offer one clarifying point. During this presentations, we did do a thorough review and discuss the supplemental terms and conditions for LIHWAP. Please be aware that there are general terms and conditions that are also applicable, and these terms and conditions are on the ACF website, and we will also ensure that we provide a link on the LIHWAP website to get you to those terms and conditions. There was a question regarding the designation letters in terms of the number of respondents. I can tell you that all but 2 states and 2 territories have responded with designation letters, and there are 33 tribes that we are still waiting on information and the designation letters for them. So let me get started with the questions. There's a question about, are the territories included in this LIHWAP appropriations? Yes, when we refer to states, states includes the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, American Samoa, Guam, the US Virgin Islands, and also Northern Mariana Islands. There was a question about allowable funds. So just to restate, the purpose of the LIHWAP funds is to assist low-income households. And again, it's particularly those households with the lowest incomes, and doing so by providing funds to owners or operators of public water systems or treatment works. And it's for purposes of reducing arrearages of and rates charged to these households. The next question is regarding use of funds, and it asks, can we use it for plumbing repair to get at the root cause of water bill issues? Again, no, the LIHWAP funds cannot be used for plumbing repair. The sole purposes is for reducing their arrearages and the rate charges. I will say that, while the administration has other infrastructure proposals that are related to replacing lead pipes and updating plumbing infrastructure, this particular funding is not for that purpose. There is a question regarding administrative funds and what amount can be used for administrative funds. As we stated in the presentation, the administrative cap for LIHWAP grantees is 15%. This is closely modeled on the LIHWAP requirements, and it's consistent with other legislation. I will say also that this is an increase from the 10% administrative cap that applies to LIHEAP. And again, encourage, if there are other considerations regarding program expenses such as startup costs that you have feedback on, then please make sure that you let us know via the survey, and we will continue to assess those items. Little bit of a long question here, so appreciate your patience. With all the funds distributing from many sources of funding, it would be possible for the household to accumulate credit balance on their water account. At what point, I think that means at some point, these providers will have to determine which portion to return if it is unused to the household's to the household individual's water account. Our standard practice is 60 days for us, but it could be various when the funds are coming from some other sources. So it sounds like you're trying to determine what to do if for some reason there's funding coming in from multiple sources, and if there is an excess, if you will, for one particular household. I will reiterate that the LIHWAP funding should not be used to create a credit for a household. And particularly, it should not be used unless the household has arrearages. And know that regarding this program, we are giving priority of this to programs that have households whose services are perhaps being disconnected, or they're facing imminent disconnection because of late payments or because of past due bills. Grantees should, however, develop policies as well as procedures regarding some specific reconciliation protocols that are between the grantee, the sub-grantee, if you're using those, as well as other water providers. The next question, will HHS treat the 2 water assistance appropriations as a singular pot of funds, or will they be separate but operate under the same administrative and reporting requirements? We are, as previously stated, focused on releasing funding from the 2021 Consolidated Appropriations Act, and all of the instructions that we have disseminated to date are related to that act. We welcome your feedback on the timeline of the release of the American Rescue Plan funds in the survey. You should know that the 2 appropriations will need to be tracked and reported separately. And to the extent possible, we are going to use the same systems and processes for reporting, for administrative requirements, for both sources of those fundings. But we will take the time to sort of identify opportunities to make improvements if appropriate. And that is the approach that we're taking to date. I think I addressed this a little bit. It said, can LIHWAP funds be used to replace or repair the household well water pump? Again, LIHWAP funds are not for repair. The fund's sole purpose is for reducing arrearages and and rates charged to eligible low-income households. We have a question about program guidance and when program guidance will be released. OCS is releasing program guidance on a rolling basis. Just wanting to ensure that we are releasing guidance that's accurate and gives you the ability to efficiently implement the program. In February, we released some action transmittals about the designation letters from government officials, and to identify for us who the responsible government officials are. In April, we also released a Dear Colleague letter regarding program implementation process, and about this session today for our external stakeholders and our grantees. I will tell you that upcoming guidance will include a final LIHWAP model plan, which is of course going to be based on some of the feedback that we get from the survey, reporting guidance, as well as a technical assistance strategy to work to be responsive to some of the information you share in the survey. There's a question about procedures for submission of state, territory, and tribal plans, including any sort of assurances and certifications that are required. Again, we're going to be finalizing the model plan after we get information back via the survey. The guidance regarding the submission process for the model plan is being developed, and we anticipate sending that out once we complete the final version of that model plan, which will be in May. I can tell you that the Debarment Drug-Free Workplace and the anti-lobbying certifications also apply to LIHWAP. So for those of you that are LIHEAP grantees, you should be familiar with some of those. There's a question about how individuals get assistance to pay water bills through LIHWAP. Individuals will have to apply to the entities in their area that are administering the LIHWAP program. Grantees should conduct outreach activities and develop an application process to identify LIHWAP eligible households. OCS will provide some guidance and technical assistance in that area. However, I will say that we are encouraging grantees to consider and use any existing processes and procedures, as OCS did, to make sure that their program is stood up as efficiently and as quickly as possible. I have a few more questions here regarding funding and obligation. Can unused funding be returned at the end of the term limit? So all obligated funding under the Consolidated Appropriation Act must be liquidated no later than 3 months after the end of the application period, which for LIHWAP is December 31st, 2023. Any of the funds from the award that are not liquidated by this time will be recouped by the department. So that is the term limit as referenced in the question. Everything must be liquidated by December 31st, 2023. Given the fact that it will take time for many states to set up an application, eligibility determination, and payment issuance process, will the deadline for spending funds from 2021 Appropriations Act and the American Rescue Plan be extended? At present, the obligation period for LIHWAP is September 30th, 2023. And any of those funds that are not obligated by that time period have to be recouped by the department. I would say, again, in the survey, provide your feedback in terms of timing of the release of the ARP funding and concerns about expenditure. And I'm going to do one more question, and then I will pass it over to another colleague to take over. Can a household apply through both a state and a tribal program for LIHWAP benefits? A household would be eligible to apply to the tribal LIHWAP if their tribe is administering the program. If the tribe is not administering the program, the state would be responsible for conducting outreach and making intake services accessible to the tribe. So I am now going to pass it over to my colleague, Lauren, to answer a few more of the questions.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. That was a lot of information. I see there's a question here. Will customers who are eligible for both LIHEAP and LIHWAP be required to submit 2 different applications? That is a decision that we anticipate will be within the grantees' realm of decision-making to make, one of the flexibilities that they would have. I would note, though, that in the terms and conditions that are specific to LIHWAP, I believe it's 11C, the paragraph 11C, it talks about household eligibility. So I think what I've seen from the chat box is that there might be a little confusion about housing cost data, which is related to something ACF would be doing regarding the funding allocation versus what rules each grantee will have to set regarding household eligibility. And so the term and condition 11C as in Charlie talks about household eligibility. And for the most part, it really just mirrors the household eligibility parameters that are in the LIHEAP statute. And so, you know, each grantee will have to make sure that they set an income-based eligibility cutoff or threshold, and they can choose to use either federal poverty guidelines, FPG, or state median income, SMI, and they can choose where to set that within the broad federal parameters, which is typically 150% of FPG or 60% of SMI, whichever is greater, but nothing lower than 110% of FPG. In addition, grantees, the prime grantee, states, territories, and tribes can choose to also allow income eligibility based off of something we refer to as categorical eligibility. And so that means basically the state is accepting that a household is automatically eligible for LIHEAP, or in this case, LIHWAP, because someone in the household is already receiving one of several different programs, and that includes the Supplemental Security Income, SSI. It includes the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, SNAP. It includes the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, TANF, and means-tested veteran programs. What's a little unique about LIHWAP, the water program, is that we are now including LIHEAP, the Energy Assistance Program, as a program that grantees can use for categorical eligibility. So coming back to the question, does a household have to submit two different applications? From our perspective at the federal level, no, there's not a federal requirement that the household submit two different applications. So that rests on the grantee deciding they're going to allow categorical eligibility, or at least having some sort of combined application for LIHEAP and LIHWAP if they're using the same income eligibility cutoffs. So if there are more questions about that, we'd be happy to talk with you offline. I see another question here. Does LIHWAP apply before or after other assistance programs, or is that a state tribal decision? I think this question might be related to a question Janelle addressed, which is, you know, what if this results in some sort of credit? So, you know, the household has now made good on all their past due balances, and the LIHWAP would actually give them some overage, like a cushion, for future bills. And so, you know, our reading of the legislation is that's not really the intent. The intent is to prioritize those households that are still in a past due status, where they still have arrearages and they're disconnected or they're facing disconnection, and making sure those households get served first and get ideally served to the extent that we resolve that disconnection or continuity of service jeopardy. And that is actually a specific term and condition in the LIHWAP conditions. It's paragraph 11G as in go. And I can kind of read that for you. Paragraph G says the grantee will establish policies, procedures, and benefit levels on behalf of households that prioritize continuity of water services, including prevention of disconnection and restoration of water services to households for which water services were previously disconnected. So that is a specific term and condition. So from our perspective, the order in which households get different forms of assistance, whether that's through the Community Services Block Grant, CSBG, or the Department of Treasury's Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which can also cover some utilities. From our perspective, the order doesn't matter insofar as what matters is that there's still some sort of past due balance that the water grant would be helping to resolve. The next question I see is, can water or wastewater utilities apply to get a grant directly on behalf of a customer who qualifies? So I'm going to answer that in two ways. Just to be clear, in terms of getting the federal grant directly from our office, our relationship is only going to be with the state governments, the territory governments, and the tribal governments or tribal organizations. And that is why we've been sending our action transmittals directly to those entities regarding steps to apply for the federal grant. To the extent that, for example, states choose to use sub-grantees or sub-recipients, and as Janelle mentioned, we are certainly encouraging that they try to use the same local providers that are already providing LIHEAP, so that we can, again, use that existing knowledge and procedures to get this program running as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible. Then that is a relationship between the state and whatever local providers they choose to work with. So whether it's modifying existing agreements with those providers or establishing new agreements specific to the water program. So there would not be a direct grant from us to a water provider. Now, if the question is really trying to get at can a water provider submit an application to the state or the local agency that's doing intake on behalf of a household, I think that's going to be a question for the states and subgrantees to work out through their written procedures. I think one thing they would really have to consider is just making sure that it doesn't pose any sort of conflict of interest concerns. You know, in general, we don't really want you know, the same person who's going to be receiving the benefit and crediting the household account to have any sort of role in approving the application. But again, I think this is a question that each state and subgrantee will need to work out together. I see another question regarding what does it mean that continuity of service is strongly prioritized under LIHWAP versus encouraged but not required for LIHEAP? And the related question is there a mandatory requirement for LIHWAP concerning continuity of service? So I think I may have addressed that with my earlier response regarding term and condition 11G, that the state, tribe, and territory must establish policies, procedures, and benefit levels on behalf of households which prioritize continuity of water services. So this really relates to what we talk about in the LIHEAP world is a benefit matrix or some way of knowing how the amount of assistance will be different for each household based on a number of different factors, such as the total household income, the number of eligible members of the household, and some factor of home energy cost or need. So likewise, for the water program, the amount of water assistance will need to vary depending on the situation of the household. And what we're saying is grantees have to target those households that are facing the highest water burden in terms of how much of their income is going to those drinking water and wastewater bills. And again, even within that, prioritizing those households that are disconnected already or very soon will be disconnected. The next question I see is, there are many, many, many more, by a factor of 10, water or wastewater providers than heating utilities in many states. How has your agency considered this and adapted regulations or guidance to take this into account? And so, you know, this is an area that we are specifically seeking input on through this next week or so of the survey and through these feedback sessions. We know there's some overlap in some of the relationships that our existing LIHEAP grantees and sub-grantees have with some water providers, particularly where it's maybe a municipal or a cooperative service provider where they have electric, water, and other services all in one account. But we know that does not account for everybody. So we are anticipating that our grantees and sub-grantees will need to do a lot of legwork to identify the other water and wastewater providers in their service area and be reaching out to them very quickly after receiving the grant to establish those negotiations. You've heard us mention about consumer protections that are required, and they are required in the terms and conditions, specifically in paragraph 11H, as in Harry. There's a set of consumer protections, again, mostly modeled after the LIHEAP consumer protections, about billing practices and notifications to the household, reconciliation to ensure that the water benefit was credited in the right amount to the right household in a timely manner, that if that household was in some sort of disconnect status, that there's confirmation that their services were restored timely. And so those are federal expectations that we have of our grantees to be ensuring through their agreements, both with any local providers, intake agencies, but also with the water providers and through their monitoring and training and technical assistance. So for those water entities that are not used to working with our LIHEAP partners, we just really ask that they keep the lines of communication open and are receptive to the negotiations and requests that the grantees are making, because again, these are being driven by the federal terms and conditions for them to receive the grants in the first place. The next question I see is, if we have an elderly client that wants to apply for the LIHWAP program, whose income is only Social Security income, but the client's home is already paid in full, then that person will not be eligible for the program because it doesn't have a mortgage payment for the 30% expenses eligibility. Is that correct? No, I don't think that's correct. I think the writer might be a little confused about the legislation where it talks about housing costs. And again, that was a directive to our agency, ACF, to consider in how we distribute the grant funding across the states, tribes, and territories. So that only impacts how the funding is spread across the U.S. It does not bind the states, tribes, and territories in terms of how they will decide whether John Doe household is eligible or not. Now, generally speaking, the way we approach it with LIHEAP is, again, that there's some specific federal parameters within which the grantee has to set income eligibility or categorical eligibility, and they can be more stringent than those kind of baseline criteria. So we do see some LIHEAP grantees that, for example, impose an assets test or other kinds of eligibility criteria. And that's okay. They can be more stringent than the federal minimum. They just can't be less stringent than the federal minimum. So there's no federal requirement that we anticipate that will look at a household's housing costs. If a grantee chooses to do that, that would be within their choice to make. The next question I see is, so we don't have to have funds used up by the end of the current fiscal year. That is correct. Again, we anticipate issuing the funding by the end of May, but you, the grantee, do not need to obligate or expend it within the next several months within federal fiscal year 2021. We are permitting you to obligate it through September 30th, 2023. But I do want to emphasize, as I said in my earlier remarks, this is an emergency program. It's a program that arose out of this pandemic to help people as quickly as possible so that they can keep themselves with, continuous, affordable drinking water and wastewater services so that they can follow the CDC guidance to help minimize the transmission of the COVID-19 virus. So, it's with that in mind that we're working around the clock as quickly as we can to get these rules out, to get the funding out. And that is why we implore all of our partners, our states, tribes, and territories, any sub-grantees that they partner with, and with all the water providers that they're establishing relationships with, to keep that in mind, that we need to get these monies out on behalf of households sooner rather than later. The next question I see is there an estimate of award yet? Understanding the numbers will change if the missing 30 potential grantees do or do not follow through. So as I've mentioned a few times, we do anticipate releasing funding by the end of May. Now, I would just say that it's one thing for us to figure out the calculations and how much money is going to everyone, as opposed to when we can actually issue an individual grant award to a specific state, tribe, or territory. So, we do not intend to hold up the funding to everybody because of the few that we're still waiting to hear from. But just know that if you're a state, tribe, or territory and you want to administer this program, you will not have access to your funding until you meet these different requirements. And to access that first 15% for you to use for administrative costs, you have to send to us the signed LIHWAP terms and conditions, as well as the standard form 424M. And again, our team is standing ready to help individual prospective grantees offline if you're running into any sort of issues trying to complete and send those documents to us by email as instructed in the action transmittal. The next question I see is, what safeguards is HHS adopting to ensure that consumers who receive water or wastewater from small water systems will have the same access to assistance as those with large private water? We are concerned the funding will go straight to large private systems, leaving very little left for roughly 1,000 small systems in our state. So while our agency, will be distributing the money across all the states, DC, 5 territories, and upwards of 150 tribes or tribal organizations, each of those prime grantees will in turn need to make decisions about how they're going to disperse the money across their service territories. So, we anticipate, for example, that many states will be working with local intake agencies, many of which are community action agencies, other nonprofits, some city or county governments. And so they have to make decisions each year and even throughout the year, like with their LIHEAP, as to how much funding to allocate to each of those counties or service areas. And they will even make adjustments throughout the year if they see there's maybe not as much need in one area as they anticipate, but then there's more need in another area, and they'll shift funds throughout the year or the performance period of those sub-agreements. So we anticipate a similar approach will be taken with the water program as well. For those states or tribes that are not working with local intake agencies, again, they have their own way of processing applications centrally and deciding how those funds are dispersed. So that's really a grantee level decision. But our anticipation, our expectation is that, again, the entire service area is addressed, working within the legislative intent that the payments are going on behalf of households to the drinking water or the wastewater provider, which may be the same entity or they may be different entities depending on that specific location. And it's to help pay down those past due balances and help with those rates. The last question I think I will address before turning it over to somebody else is, can LIHWAP be issued as a supplement to LIHEAP? And by supplement, I mean, can we determine eligibility for both programs at once with one application and issue the benefits simultaneously? Okay, so I think that's related to one of the first questions I addressed, which is that's really a decision that each state, tribe, or territory will make in terms of whether they're going to have 2 separate applications, they're going to have 1 combined application, if they will also allow categorical eligibility so that any households, for example, that got LIHEAP in 2021 are automatically eligible for the water program. And of course, that's kind of like the first step if they're taking that approach, because they would still need to know who the water provider is, the account number for that household with the water provider, and to determine how much of that water benefit that household would receive, again, making sure they're prioritizing the households that are in past due status and disconnected or almost disconnected. So, you know, being eligible is one thing, but then deciding how much of the benefit is the other part of the equation, not to be forgotten. Okay, so I think with that, you know, actually, I think we've addressed a number of questions, so maybe I should check in with Edie. Do you think it would be time now to maybe shift to the listening part of the session?
So for all the questions that weren't addressed in this, we will have a record of them and we will also consider them following the session. So now we'll be moving to the listening session portion of this session. And so how this will work is if you would like to give a verbal comment, you should click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. And then we will select an order of when people raise their hands for folks to unmute themselves and speak for 2 minutes. So we know that this is a limited time and we're limiting response time in the interest of hearing from a greater number of attendees. And in that spirit, we also encourage you to avoid repeating someone else's comment if it has already been said. This is not in lieu of written feedback. We still encourage you to use a survey where you can provide a greater context for your feedback. And we will also not be responding directly to your comments. So if it is a question or if it is a comment, we will take that into advisement and then the session will also be recorded, but we will not be unmuting ourselves to speak directly in response. And then how this will work is I will actually share my screen with a timer and then start the 2-minute timer countdown so that you will know how much time you have back. And then after the, each person concludes, I will say the name of the person who is up to speak. I will unmute you, but then you also have to unmute your mic on your end. I will probably mispronounce some of your names and I apologize for that in advance, but I will do the best that I can. And then with that, I will begin sharing my screen. And the first person up, ooh, let me make sure I can see the list. Okay, great. And then the first person up is Sue Shama.
And
so
you have to unmute yourselves.
Yeah. So I unmuted you, but you also have to unmute your mic. So we're having some issues. So how about I'll go to the next person in line, Greg Gare, and then we will come back to Sushama.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. I work for a nonprofit 501c3 that is a LIHEAP consortium provider in California, representing 48 very small tribes in California. Some tribes only get a few hundred or a few $1,000s a year for their LIHEAP program. It's only by forming our consortium that we're able to make a viable LIHEAP program for these 48 tribes in California. When I have not yet responded to the survey and have been trying desperately to get a phone number or a human being to talk to about the process, everything talks about each individual government certifying for the LIHWAP program. you say there's only 30 left. I have 48 tribes and I have not submitted a letter. And trying to find out from all these tribes whether they've submitted a letter or not is a fairly time-intensive process. How do we find out who the tribes are that have been submitted and who are the ones still waiting? And how do we find out technical assistance from your agency, from your organization, for people who are not strictly a tribal government, but a consortium of very small tribes? These would be things I'd love to see addressed so that we can respond by the very tight timelines that you had and make sure that some of the smallest, most rural, and most poverty-stricken people on the West Coast in California are not excluded from this process. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next up, Brian Sorensen.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just had a quick note about the between the state plan draft and the guidance that was selected in paragraph 11. Oh, I wrote it down. It says state 150% of state income, poverty income, and on the plan it says federal income. And I know that the LIHEAP standards are 150% of the federal poverty level. So I just wanted to make sure before I asked my governor to sign that that could be just clarified for me to make sure that we're following the same rules for that. And then just want to again clarify that we can at some point receive a liaison and be able to discuss that with that person. And I will surrender the last of my minute. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person up is Juan Aguilar. Juan, if you're speaking, I think you need to unmute yourself. Okay, so we'll go to the next person, Nicole Hill.
Yes, I'm work for a 501c3 in Michigan, particularly in the Detroit area. And one of the main issues we've had with funding to particularly water utilities is that there is a definite and blatant lack of transparency with information as far as how many residents need assistance. And there's also a very big lack of accountability with those numbers. And I was just wondering what protocols will be in place to ensure accuracy in distribution of this funding to the community, as well as ensuring that they're transparent and held accountable for conducting themselves in the correct manner with this funding.
Thank you for your comment. The next person is Casey Killen-Letron.
This is Casey from Oklahoma. I'm asking about the credit balance that we discussed. Janelle mentioned about it earlier. So the utility provider is asking us how do they enforce with funding a tech precedent to especially when it comes to LIHWAP, money coming from the state, or the money coming from the tribe, or the money come from CSPG or any other sort of funding. We just want to ensure that there is a rule and regulation in place in our contract to make sure there is no double dipping that creating the credit balance problem. And that is, I'm going to use my 1 minute left to anyone else. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. The next person is Jonathan Nelson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for this listening session. My name is Jonathan Nelson. I'm the Policy Director with the Community Water Center, an environmental justice community-based organization based out in California. And I want to flag a couple quick comments and questions. And we've also provided comments on behalf of multiple organizations in writing. The first is just to flag that this issue of access is really a top priority for environmental justice organizations. We want to make sure that small water systems that typically struggle to access other sources of assistance are able to benefit from this assistance, given we know small and rural and communities of colors have been most impacted by the pandemic. We also want to flag, although we understand there may be challenges with this, the importance of making sure that that everyone can access regardless of immigration status, and would like to continue to at least flag that issue of being great importance for communities. And then finally, want to flag that a concern that we make sure that both utilities are not shutting off customers that maybe have such great debt that maybe this assistance can only address some of their debt, but then they still have additional debt that they can't afford to pay off on their own. We want to make sure that we're using this to preserve access to water, and so want to have a continued conversation about protections around water shutoffs. With that, thank you for the time. Look forward to further discussion.
Awesome, thank you. The next person is Benjamin Gulker.
Hi, thank you. I work with state government in Michigan. I just wanted to take a quick second to note how much I appreciate two things that you guys are doing with this. The first is making the 15% admin available right away. I think that's extremely helpful, especially in the times we're facing now. The second is just wanted to affirm and express appreciation for the work you're doing around categorical eligibility, and make sure you know how much of a difference that makes for the local intake organizations. Just saves them a ton of time, helps them be more efficient, and really helps us get this money out the door in the spirit of the legislation, which is to move quickly in response to the emergency. And with that, I will go back on mute. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. The next person is Kalima Rose.
Hi, good morning. I am calling in from PolicyLink, which is a national racial equity and advocacy organization based in California, and we co-convene the Water Equity and Climate Resilience Caucus, which represents over 100 organizations across the country that are working to address the affordability issues for water in their communities. And I want to both lift up the importance of engaging these community advocacy organizations in the development of the plans. And I want to echo the transparency challenges that our members have faced in working with their utilities to understand the number, the level, and the geography of shutoffs in their communities. And so want to encourage that any model plan that you do lays out the public participation process and asks the participating entities to actually document the need statewide that they are facing, so it can inform future appropriations and allocations of programmatic dollars, and that there be transparent reporting back to the community about the number of households who have been served and at what level, and what either exhaustion of funds or remaining funds are there, so that we can ensure that the lowest income people of whatever immigration status and that racial equity and environmental justice communities are served by the program. So thank you very much for your commitment to this comment period.
Thank you. The next person is Meg Power.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Meg Bauer. I'm with the National Community Action Foundation, representing community action agencies in Washington. I like to associate myself with all the 4 or 5 commenters right before me. Those are all concerns community action agencies share and suggestions they support. We have a couple of others. You're doing at OCS so many things right so quickly. With a minute and a half left, I'm just going to say a couple of things we think are missing or need reconsidering. One of them is this question of whether repairs are allowed. There's nothing that we can see clear, even though it's not mentioned in the legislation. It doesn't say that you have to leave a home with leaking pipes after you've paid for the enormous bills that have been run up by water that couldn't be used by anybody because it leaked out. And we wish that in parallel to LIHEAP, there'd be a component for water efficiency and repairs. All of our agencies who are now doing anything with water bills and housing and even weatherization are seeing a great need for repairing leaks. And the other is that I wish that you would consider in the state plan allowing a state to make a grantee to make a case that in order to do the startup of the program, especially if they have many small utilities that have to learn how to do vendor agreements and take federal payments or state payments, that they make a case to you that they need additional money in addition to the 15% they need to run the program for almost 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is David Wortman, and I will note we also have time for a few more comments, but actually there aren't any more hands raised. So if you would like to make a comment and you haven't done so, just click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I will unmute David.
Yes, thank you. I'm David Wortman, the state of Illinois. So on this webinar earlier, it was said that a LIHWAP benefit should not end up with a credit on the account, and the focus should be avoiding disconnection or providing reconnection. So the question I have, I guess, or the comment is that we can either run this as an entitlement program, where if you meet the income requirements in the household, that you get a benefit. But if we run it like that, accounts are likely going to end up with a credit because if they don't come in with a huge bill and they meet the income requirements, then they're eligible for this benefit and it will be a credit. Or we can run it as an emergency program to avoid disconnection or provide reconnection, in which case they meet the requirement, but they only get the benefit if they're in that condition. Or we could run it like LIHEAP where it's both. But I guess I just want clarification on, was that comment about not creating a credit, is that a rule or a regulation that's going to be put forth? Because that would greatly affect the way we run our program. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. The next person is Candy. Candy, we can't hear you. Oh, now I see you're unmuted. I see you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. So there might be an issue with the mic. So Candy, I will come back to you. Don't lower your hand, but I will go to the next person who is Juliet Ellis.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Perfect. Yay. So just want to say thank you for hosting this listening session. I'm Juliet, and I'm the chair of the Water Agency Leaders Alliance, which is a group of about 30 progressive utilities from around the country working on water equity issues, and wanted to both just make a statement and pose a question. And so the statement is what we're seeing across the country as the utilities are looking at who's falling further and further behind on keeping up with their water bills is that there's a whole new population of customers and households that had not had delinquent accounts prior to the pandemic that are now 6, 9, 12 months behind in being able to pay their bill because of impacts of the pandemic. And so I think one is trying to figure out and be able to meet those additional new customers' needs and the threat of being shut off, and to think creatively about that new population. And then the second piece is, given the urgency and that so many of utilities are looking at lifting their moratoriums this year, how to have a more streamlined process. And so I think, again, there's lots of great models like Louisville Water and other places that have allowed for self-attestation with regards to income verification. That's really streamlined the process with regards to being able to quickly and responsibly get money into the hands of customers that are at risk of being shut off. So again, a big plug for self-attestation, easier income verification, especially given the urgency around shutoffs happening soon. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Candy, I am going to come back to you. I think one suggestion might be if you're calling in via phone, you have to unmute your mic on your phone as well. So give that a shot. Okay, I still cannot hear you, but I will come back. I'll move on to the next person in the list, who is Mary Camp.
Yes, my name is Mary Camp. I'm with a very, very, very small tribe in California. I basically have two questions. One is any kind of an estimate on the dollar amounts. We get $2,000 a year for LIHEAP. And when I'm looking at another 30-page application, there has to be enough funding backing it up to make it something that we need to do. The second question that I have is, we are going into an extremely heavy drought in California. Our particular water provider may run out of drinking water by midsummer. And so I'm wondering if we can use this to pay for water service to the households. They're going to have to purchase water from, Sparklets or somebody, because there will be no drinking water available to the houses. So can we use it to assist them to meet that kind of a water bill? Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you. Candy, I'm coming back to you. Can you try unmuting one more time? There should be a mute button if you're on. Oh, I think you're unmuted, but I still can't hear any audio. So I think maybe try reselecting which audio it is, and then in the meantime, I'm going to move to the next person, Christina Surface.
Thank you. Christina Surface with the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. We're an organization representing the nation's public wastewater and stormwater treatment agencies nationally. We are thrilled with this opportunity for federal assistance for low-income water ratepayers and are really pleased to see it getting underway. And as it happens, there's 2 points I did want to make. One is just to speak a bit to the scale of the funding available relative to total national need. Estimates from Clean Drinking Water Utilities are around over $8 billion just related to increased inability to pay for water and wastewater services due to the pandemic over 1 year. And so the $1.1 billion in assistance is a significant first step in this, but just want to, and I know we've raised that point with HHS, and at this point, we're grateful for the funding that is available, but just for everybody's benefit to kind of put into perspective the scale of funding available relative to the scale of this challenge. And secondly, just to echo some of the other remarks around elevating existing programs that work. As you know, there's a number of different approaches to customer assistance and successful programs in place at utilities around the country. And so as these programs get underway and as state guidance moves forward, just encouraging looking at what already works at utilities and working with that to help streamline the process and get this funding out expeditiously. As others have mentioned, arrears have grown significantly, moratoriums are being lifted, and so just an urgency in getting the funding out. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Candy, one possible thing that we could try is you can put your comment in the comment box and we could read it for you. And I can stop sharing for a second and then go to it and see. In the meantime, we still have 5 or so minutes left for comments. So if anyone would like to make a verbal comment, even if you've made a comment already, you can raise your hand. I see a Cassandra Lovejoy, so I will unmute you, Cassandra.
Hi, this is Cassandra Lovejoy from the National Energy Assistance Directors Association. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I just want to take a second to thank everybody for the wonderful information provided in this webinar. This has been much anticipated details about this program, and I know that we've been working closely with HHS to try to figure out some of these details and make recommendations. And I think that you guys have done a really great job thinking through the LIHWAP program and trying to make sure that it works best for coordination with LIHEAP and other related programs. I particularly appreciate the administrative funds at 15%. That is something that we were very concerned about for our state and all of our local partners being able to stand up a program like this. So I really appreciate you being able to put 15% of the administration. And I wanted to bring something up kind of early on as this program is being developed. One of the questions that we're thinking about in LIHEAP right now is national messaging. And one of the things our state directors have been talking about is the use of the term low income in and how it seems to be a barrier for some folks lining up. And so as we're standing up the LIHWAP program, maybe we might want to think about calling it something that doesn't stress that it's low income, especially if we're going to be kind of changing the messaging of LIHEAP. So that's just kind of one thing that I want to get on everybody's mind early so that we don't get too far down this road and end up having to do a similar thing in LIHWAP that we're thinking about in LIHEAP. So again, thank you very much for an excellent webinar and some excellent supporting documents. We're eager to dig through them and get you our feedback.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. The next person up is Kathy Bailey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Kathy Bernardino Bailey. I'm Executive Director of Greater Cincinnati Waterworks, Cincinnati, Ohio. And just a couple comments I'd like to make. One is probably similar to the last caller, where as water utilities, we sometimes struggle with our messaging and our marketing advertisement of programs. And so I'm a little concerned how we will share information about this program, given the fact that here in Cincinnati, we just had a water service debt forgiveness program that we tried to market the heck out of that thing. And we still did not have many people come into the program to really forgive a lot of their charges. So I'm hopeful that with this program that there will be key, ways that we can share the messages across the different platforms and partner with groups, and hopefully there will be guidance on how we can do that. And then the second thing I'd like to share is I'm just a little concerned about the information or how the program will be shared with the water utilities, given I guess that it's going to be at the state level. I'm just a little concerned about how maybe some of those definitions might be used as far as how they define disadvantaged communities or how the grants will be shared. And maybe it's just my lack of understanding at that level how the money will come down to the utilities for us to use, because I'm concerned that we might miss opportunities in receiving those grants to help all the different subsets of our communities receive the funding that they need for their arrearages on their bills. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. With that, I think that is all the time that we have for the listening session. And Candy, we received your comment and thank you so much. With that, I will turn it back over to our director, Dr. Laniqua Howard.
Thank you so much, Edie. And I cannot thank everyone enough for spending the last 2 hours with us as we work to better understand the water landscape and identify ways to efficiently and effectively stand up this program. We've heard a number of themes throughout both the question and answers portion of this webinar, as well as during the last 30 minutes during our listening portion of the webinar, including concerns around ensuring small tribes and rural communities have access to funds, the type of services that can be paid through LIHWAP, and the type of flexibility states and local programs have with regards to their program design. We will take back everything that we've learned and utilize it as we begin to finalize our program design and our training and technical assistance for grantees. And even though we will take back everything that we have learned today, I still encourage you to utilize that survey to really ensure that we are understanding the full landscape of the needs and challenges you have with regard to this program. And while there will be some aspects of the challenges that you pose that we will not be able to address, for instance, the legislation requires us to spend the funding on water assistance, water and wastewater assistance, so arrearages and current bills. We find it still really, really important to know that there are other services that households need in order to really make this an effective program, such as support with plumbing and those kind of issues. So as much as we can document those needs and document what you are seeing in the field, it will help us as we continue to advocate for this program and look at ways to support households not only during the pandemic, but afterwards as we continue to deal with this water affordability crisis. And so lastly, I will just say thank you, thank you, thank you for the work that you're doing. And please remember that Tuesday, April 27th is the golden day. So we really need you to submit your your signed letter of terms and conditions, as well as your survey results. And please also remember that if you have questions about whether or not your state, territory, or tribe has submitted their designation letters, you can reach out to the LIHWAP mailboxes that Christina shared earlier. It's also on our LIHWAP page. We continue to send personal communications to all of the states, tribes, and territories that we have not heard from. But if you have a specific question, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are waiting to support you, and we are working diligently to not only stand up this program, but also to incorporate all of the feedback that we are hearing from you, because we really want this to be a successful program. We know that it's needed, and we know that it's an urgent need at this point. With that, I would like to say thank you again, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye.